Continuation of a joint public hearing of the City Council on Planning Board, excuse me, was held in Council Chamber on Monday, November 27th at 6:30 PM for the purpose of discussing amendments to the zoning map as follows. Section 3.0, Table of Principal and Accessory Uses relative to marijuana. Section 6.0, Special Regulations relative to marijuana establishments. And Section 10.0, Definition relative to marijuana terms and definitions. Notice of this meeting was posted on November 16th, 2017 at 10:21 a.m. Councilors absent are Councilor Ryan, Councilor Lovely, Councilor Famico. President Milo presided. If the members of the planning board, wait a minute. So from the administration, we have Assistant City Solicitor Vicki Caldwell. We have Chief Mary Butler. I think the mayor's coming, right? Okay. The mayor should be here shortly. I think she wanted to address us. And if we could have the planning board members introduce themselves.
Sir, Bill Brissett.
Dale.
Kurt Reeder.
Noah Korax.
Ellen Sides.
Matt Pino as vice chair, sitting in for Ben Anderson, who's chair and cannot be here today. And Carol Hamilton is not going to be able to make it, and as I mentioned, Ben Anderson homestead.
Okay. And then we have Amanda Chincola and who did I miss? Did I miss anybody?
Erin Schaefer, staff planner, zoning board of appeals.
Sorry. Thank you, Erin. Okay. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is the Councilor Dibble.
Thank you, Madam President. Just a brief point of personal privilege, if I may. I didn't want to wait till our next council meeting to do this. I'd like to briefly recognize a couple people who are typically not recognized at all. Very recently, very recently, two neighbors of mine, both diagonally across the street, passed away, Mrs. Lavecchio and Mrs. Sokol. Two wonderful ladies who gave me a lot of inspiration over the last many decades. Mrs. Sokol spent the last 20, 25 years Christmas morning in my house, watching my children grow up. And they raised two wonderful Salem families. Both lived diagonally across the street from me on Moffett Road and Auburn Road, right across the street from me. And I just wanted to recognize, to have a moment of silence briefly for both Mrs. Lavecchio and Mrs. Sokol, who just passed away.
Sure. Could all stand? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the first matter we'll continue with is Section 3.0, Table of Principal and Accessory Uses relative to marijuana. Do we have any questions from councilors from the last meeting? Or, I don't know if, Vicki, if you or Erin can address us regarding some of the questions, excuse me, that we had last time?
Erin Schaefer, staff planner of the Zoning Board of Appeals. It's my I apologize I wasn't here at the last meeting. I had a Zoning Board of Appeals meeting that night. So it's my understanding that there was a question before us on why we didn't include the NRCC as part of the zoning ordinance. Wanted to let you know that as I was drafting this ordinance, I was thinking about the NRCC, but the NRCC is a special district in and of itself and not affiliated with the table of principal and accessory uses. So it's our intent to address and take a look at these uses in relation to the NRCC at a later date, but that is not currently before us. Again, the NRCC district is a separate and distinct zoning ordinance under the special, it's a special district in and of itself that's not related to the table of uses. And I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Councilor Dibble?
Yes, Madam Chair. if we could just clarify that a little bit in my mind's eye, the NRCC it provides for specific zones, zoning, just like an R1 or B1 would be as well. It's not an overlay zone. It is a separate zone.
Correct.
I think we need to address it as part of this public hearing, insofar as what is allowed and what is not allowed in the NRCC. So it is a separate, it is a zone by itself, just like a B1 or an R1,
Correct.
correct? So why wouldn't we want to make a recommendation here and have it as part of this whole table?
Because currently, as our zoning ordinance is laid out, the NRCC, the North River Canal Corridor District, is a separate and distinct zone, even though we regulate, even though that zone regulates uses, it is not incorporated currently in the table of principal and accessory use regulations, as it is its own set of standards and regulations, both in dimensional requirements and uses. So it's separate and distinct from the table of uses that's before us.
Is that it, Councilor Dibble? You all set?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm still not clear on why the R1 is a separate and distinct zone, the B1, the B2, and I understand that it's not in the list, but we need to include it in this whole conversation so we know what we're going to allow or not allowed within that zone. I know it's not my ward, but we want to do the whole city at one time. At least I do.
Thank you.
Councilor Repley.
Thank you, Madam President. I agree with the Ward 7 councilor. It doesn't make any sense for us not to be bringing this up. In fact, the only current allowed use for medicinal marijuana is within the NRCC. So it absolutely boggles the mind why we wouldn't be including that in the discussion tonight.
Councilor McCarthy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not going to sit here and argue the points about whether or not it should be included or not included. I'm going to argue the points that what's in front of us is this table, and as the table appears in the zoning book, the NRCC does not appear in the table.
Correct.
It appears exactly the way it does, so if you're looking for any other usage in the zoning book, this is the way the table appears. The NRCC is separate and distinct. I'm not disagreeing that the NRCC should be up for discussion, but as it is, it's not in the table the way the table appears. So if the discussion is simply about section 3.0, 3.0 is the table, and the NRCC does not appear in the table in the zoning book.
Councilor Terrio.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm okay with taking up the zones that we have before us. I do think we should have had the NRCC included within this. Whether we had it as a separate piece of the ordinance or however, I think we should have addressed this because, again, the NRCC has a lot of manufacturing space. It has space that probably would be well suited, for instance, for the manufacturing usage, for the testing usage, perhaps even for the cultivation usage. And from a standpoint of just having direction, we're not likely talking about a large number of retail licenses, given that I think we will probably wind up adopting that 20% limit, and that's a separate discussion that is in a committee, not in this public hearing, but we probably should have done a better job of having like the whole big picture in front of us for this. I mean, as this goes forward, as the discussion goes forward, I think at the first public hearing, we had a lot of opinions expressed about other zone usages and possible changes to this, but I do think it would be in everybody's best interest to make the NRCC part of this conversation sooner than later, whether it means, bringing in a separate proposal to us next week that we can have or in 2 weeks when we have our next meeting that we can then schedule a joint public hearing on that, or however, we do need to move forward that and not leave that zone out of the discussion ultimately.
Councilor Repley, and then
I
Mr. Vino.
wasn't able to attend the last meeting because I was seeing Mickey Mouse at the time, and I thought that was a better use of my time, unfortunately. But I am here today, and I've had some concerns about any regulation taking place on any marijuana facility, because correct me if I'm wrong, this may have been part of the discussion a couple of weeks ago, but the state has not come down with any final regulations on this. Is that correct?
Correct.
Correct.
And so I really think it's the cart before the horse And so I'm really hesitant on us either going overboard in regulating this or perhaps underboard in that respect. I think what we want to do is we definitely want to be in line with whatever the state is recommending. Second, I don't see the hurry in doing this. For one thing, this will be my next to last meeting, and there will be an entirely new council that should be considering this, not this council. If we wanted to address it, we should have addressed it earlier this year. And this seems like we're trying to rush to get something done prior to the end of this year. So I'm going to listen, but I certainly hope, especially given the fact that we have not included the NRCC in the overall look here, that we step back and that we wait to make any decisions on this. This is something I think that maybe this is put in committee, maybe this is brought up again next year in some other format, but I just think that we're just trying to rush this through. Thank you.
Mr. Vino? Oh,
Madam President, I tend to totally disagree. I think it's totally within our responsibility as a city council, with 4 new city councilors coming in. It's our primary responsibility that in this session now, because I think sooner or later, businesses are coming in, and we may not have any jurisdiction or any role if they come in. They're flying around the city, ready to go in, zooming in. If we don't have some guidelines for them as a city on a neighborhood basis, on a college basis, whether it's going to be college or library or where they're going to be, school situation, we need to set the parameters now, not delay or defer to another city council. It would be an abdication of responsibility, deferring and delaying and kicking the can down the lane to the next city council. I think we have a workshop going on in December with the new city council and the older city councilor, and we're going to fill them in and we're going to work together in a joint team effort. But it's our primary responsibility. As the dean of the city council that was saying, I don't think we should shirk our responsibility. Now, more than ever, that we have to act and set a guideline for businesses coming in. They're going to be here whether you like it or not. Whether it's next to the Dunkin' Donuts on Canal Street or wherever. But they are coming sooner or later. And I think it's our responsibility. We have the planning board here. This is our second meeting. To kick the can down the line is the responsibility of our elective office. Thank you.
May I ask if we can have the chief come forward? I just actually have a quick question. When we're talking about going slow, going too fast, going too slowly, in terms of public safety, does that have any bearing on what you folks do one way or the other?
I mean, I would guess that as long as that it was done in a timely manner before anything really precipitated, it probably would be helpful. But I guess my question is in the ordinance as it's written, does it not provide the mechanism for any state regulations to kick into play relative to, I know that they're not settled and they're probably not going to be settled till like March, but I believe that the ordinance allows for, clearly if state regulations are going to come into play, that it's actually going to address this particular issue, so.
Councilor Turiel.
Thank you, Madam President. As of, I think it was last week, the state, whatever they call it, the Cannabis Control Board or whatever they're calling it, said that they would have the regulations propagated within the month for comment before finalizing them. I think their timetable was March, so they could start taking applications in April. And I mean, given the time frame that that the state is trying to do this on, I think it's to our advantage to at least take care of the basic zoning portion of this, sooner than later. I think specific city regulations that we might pass through the city council's ordinances, through the Board of Health in terms of anything else, we should do those kind of based on what the final state regulations look like, but at least the big picture stuff, the deciding how many licenses we're going to award, the basic zoning usage table, the basic definitions, which are also in here, are things that I don't see any reason why we need to delay in moving those forward, because these are kind of the big picture portions of things, and the details will be worked out with the state regulations. So that's just my thinking on it.
Councilor Fury.
May I request, Madam President, The mayor is in the chambers, and may I request a suspension of rules to allow the mayor to speak on this issue?
Absolutely.
Public hearing,
We don't
so-
need any suspension.
Thank you.
Come on.
I spoke
forward.
up before, Mayor, about this city council has the responsibility to act now, not to kick the can down the road to the next city council. And we could do something now tonight to set the tone and direction. What's your thoughts, Mayor?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to just share a few thoughts. I wasn't at the last public hearing. I was away, and I apologize for not being here. But I think you can tell from the presentations that have been made previously that we've bounced this around a lot internally to get a handle on what we think are some of the basics. And I think we should be clear that we're not looking at this as the finality of how we would ever deal with adult use or recreational use marijuana, but the foray into it to set some of the basic ground rules. So I think it behooves us, given the interest in this issue, to work through both the cap, if that's something that folks are interested in, it's something that's being proposed, obviously accepting the local option on the excise, and then setting some of the basic ground rules with respect to zoning. I frankly was of two minds around the B5 district, and we opted to take a more conservative approach, given that it is such a new industry, at least for Massachusetts, the number of events and activities that take place within the downtown, and the feeling from our public safety officials in particular that perhaps adding this to the mix of all the things that already happened downtown right from get-go, they wanted to take maybe a step back on that. But if the council is willing, I heard there was back and forth around B5 district being included. I think that we'd manage through that if folks felt like they wanted to add that. But we feel like there are some really good basic aspects of usage that are ironed out in this proposed zoning ordinance, and we're hopeful the council will advance it so we can begin to then communicate in an orderly way with the industry who has expressed an interest in being here. We know the existing, I think we did a pretty good job with the medical marijuana facility we have, trying to manage the logistical challenges, public safety challenges, anything that was of concern through that process. We know automatically under the existing state law they would qualify, so we know there'd be at least one. We're really talking about 3 additional licenses if we accept the cap. So it's not such a robust number that we're somehow going to be overrun or concerns can't be properly managed. We think we've accounted for the majority of them in the zoning ordinance. If something needs to be fixed down the road or adjusted down the road or added to down the road, there's certainly ample opportunity to do that. This is a pretty good pathway to get us started and to be able to communicate effectively with interested parties and also set some rules. So look forward to the council's additional inquiries and additional questions if there are any, but we're hopeful that we can advance it and not leave this for the next term if at all possible. I'm happy to take any questions if there are any immediately. If not, happy to sit down and let you guys get back to business. Okay, great. Thank you.
Seeing none, thank you. Councillor Durant.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, it's a question for Aaron. Going back to the NRCC issue, so recognizing exactly what the mayor said, that we have ATG that is in the NRCC, and where Commercial Street would probably be a good spot for some of these types of businesses, and that's in the NRCC. So what happens if ATG says we want to set up our retail marijuana cultivating business on Commercial Street, and that's in the NRCC? So what happens then if the NRCC isn't on here?
Can I weigh in on this too? Just really quickly?
Please, feel free.
Join me. Aaron, I want to really give a great deal of thanks to both Aaron and our Assistant City Solicitor, Vicki Caldwell, along with Chief Butler, who have really helped build a strong team, exploring what options we have with what's happening at the state level, really queuing into that, and also bringing a great deal of, we had a lot of internal discussions before the proposed ordinance that was put before you was drafted, and in the drafting and preparation of that and teasing out and really trying to ask ourselves the hard questions that we think would come up anytime you're doing something new for the first time. And Aaron and Vicki deserve a lot of the credit for the work that's been done. I will point out the NRCC has existed in our zoning ordinance in sort of a different way. It's not in the table of uses. It doesn't exactly fit within our typical R1, R2, R3, B1. And it got left out of that table of uses with respect to this, somewhat purposefully and somewhat subconsciously. I know that sounds like conflicting, but there are a few things that don't work as well as we had anticipated they would work within the NRCC zone. And oftentimes we see folks coming up looking for variances, or we're not sure how to classify something. I think we need to put the NRCC almost in a parking lot right now. Unless people have really strong feelings, we're happy to take a look at it. But the NRCC probably needs has some housekeeping that we need to do in other areas, and it would seem to me to look at it comprehensively, whether we allow adult use in there or not, figuring out what categories within usage we'd want to put in there. There's other things that we'd like another opportunity to come back to the council and say, can we take a second look at this from a zoning perspective? Lots of times I think the planning board and the ZBA are getting requests around the NRCC that are a little fuzzy and probably don't work the way we had hoped they would, or the origin of that ordinance was literally the last day of the time period it could have been adopted 11 years ago. Councilor Vino, you might remember, you were in one of these seats, and it was, if we don't do it today, this whole NRCC proposal went away, and there are a few last-minute things added on the council floor. And if those of us who were around then remember that. So there's probably a few areas of items that I would put that in the parking lot for us to work on with respect to, do we want manufacturing facilities in there? Do we want cultivation facilities in there? Would we want retail use there? It's a little different zone than your straight up R1, B1, R2. And there's a few other items we probably, from a housekeeping perspective, we probably want to fix. And we want to go through the whole process then of advertising, obviously hearing from people, and I would suggest that might be a better approach than trying to fit it in here now, unless people had really strong feelings about that. But it seems like there's other items within there that need some work as well. So,
Councilor Dibble.
Thank you, Madam President. Just to follow up on that, through the mayor, to the mayor. What happens if we don't regulate it now? I believe it'd be a wide open with no restrictions. Why don't we just be proactive on it, regulate it to some degree now, and then if we want to make changes, have a bigger study of the NRCC, then we do so at a later point. But at least we're protecting that neighborhood.
Great. Yeah, from a land use law perspective, the NRCC is protected, even if it's precluded from this conversation. You know, if particularly with I'm trying to remember if ATG is currently in the NRCC or not. No, it is not. Okay, right outside. Never mind. So we wouldn't allow these uses in the NRCC currently as this is proposed. We are allowing our uses as proposed through the table of uses, and the NRCC, even though it's its own distinct zone, if this were to pass as is, and we wouldn't talk about the NRCC or include any of these uses in the NRCC as it would stand in that capacity, we just simply would not allow any of these 4 uses in the NRCC.
but again, I would say that it's without really taking a hard look at what types of uses we'd want to have allowed in the NRCC, where they might fit. There are requirements in the NRCC around size of commercial establishments that are really limiting, that keep right now retail uses out of there. So it needs a little bit harder look than just your standard business district or your standard residential district, because it was meant to be, something that allowed for that mixed use capacity. And there are some things that conflict within the current NRCC that I think requires a little bit more due diligence in terms of how it would work within an NRCC. I think the worst thing we could do is kind of throw it in and not do it thoughtfully, and then have it conflict with what it says for retail use, or have it conflict with what it says for industrial or manufacturing use. We took kind of a consistent approach, trying to look at the existing zones, what those industries are, and not treat manufacturing of marijuana products or cultivation or even retail sales that much differently than other similar uses, whether it's a package store or a manufacturing facility. NRCC is a little bit of a different animal, and I think we need a little bit more time to drill down to make sure that what we're proposing to do actually isn't inconsistent with what happens in that district now. And there's a few other items that are in that parking lot with the NRCC, or should be, that we should incorporate when we make those NRCC amendments as well. It would seem to me to be and I would also say there's a really active citizenry around those NRCC zones, and I think we'd want to encourage input and cooperation. That NRCC zone came out of a pretty vibrant conversation with neighborhoods, with Goody Clancy, that landed in that place. And it wasn't perfect. It's not a perfect zone right now, so we can clear up some of those imperfections and also incorporate this in. I think that would make sense. It certainly isn't the idea of keeping it out and prohibiting it from NRCC wasn't exactly intended, or is not intentional by this zoning ordinance that's before you.
That was not the intent. There's more than the table, there's more than the use discussion as well in the NRCC. The Zoning Board of Appeals and Planning Board also split roles and responsibilities within the NRCC district. So that is something that we also need to consider, as well as how an applicant will come forward, the procedures for that, and which boards or commissions are responsible for regulating forward in the NRCC for these particular uses. So it's more than just putting the uses in the NRCC and finding parallel uses. We have some questions about the function as well of who holds responsibility and how those applicants will be looked at and reviewed.
Council McCarthy? Oh, Council Gerard, did you have another question?
I just want to say that when that time comes, I would love to help work on that, since that's my ward.
Yep, yeah. I think there were a lot of voices that created the NRCC, and so some of them would certainly be interested in just, distilling this a little bit further.
Council McCarthy?
Thank you, Madam President. So for clarification, I mean, obviously, I don't think any of us, if you read the purpose, all you have to do is go to section 110.1. The purpose of this ordinance is to allow state licensed retail marijuana establishments to exist in the city of Salem in accordance with applicable state laws and regulations, and impose reasonable safeguards given the time, place, manner, blah, blah, blah. So basically, we realize the state's going to come up with a bunch of rules. We're going to, the state rules kind of, in some cases, trump local ordinances, but we want to make sure we have ordinances in place, reasonable ordinances on the books, and a reasonable time, so that when people come in prior to April, looking to establish and start spending money, and so they can be up and running, that we want to make sure we have an understanding basically where they could go. I guess, all that being said, I also agree with the NRCC is a zone that, it's a big hunk of the city that correct me if I'm wrong, from what was just said. If we adopt this ordinance, even though the NRCC directly doesn't appear in it, in the table itself, it would be treated as in such a way that it would be, if I look over at the chart that my good colleague has out, would the chart all come across as Ns or BAs? Would all come as Ns. So it would come across as all Ns at this point.
We'd have a defined use, and that defined use would not be allowed in the NRCC until such time as we made those amendments.
And we'll just put that someplace in here?
Yes.
We could certainly add that, to be clear, but we'd then have to take it out when we put in the NRCC provisions.
Perfect. Thank you.
Council Famico?
Interpretation of the zoning,
Right.
that, if it's not included in the table, it's not an allowable use, regardless if we say it in the zoning or not, I should say. That's how
if I can, it's a concern that we have a section of the city that theoretically would be left unregulated, whatever the words you want to put on it. But if at some point, because if we add the language someplace in here, in the body of this document, that states that if it's not in the table, it's not allowed use, in specific, it mentioned the NRCC, because if we deal with that at a later date, then at the same time we take it out of this existing ordinance, at the same time we adopt a new one. It's seemingly transparent, flows.
That's understood.
It's understood
Zoning law, but there's nothing to prevent us from expressing it unless specifically allowed. It's not unless specifically stated, it's not an included use.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Council Famico?
Thank you, Madam President, and I apologize for being a few moments late earlier. I have a few things. The first is, in terms of the table, I think we're about 3 years ago now, this body updated breweries and distilleries, but during that time, actually, the NRCC table was also updated to include that, so it is allowed. The second part of that, with the NRCC ordinance, it says other uses that are the same in nature to the uses specified above as of right determined by the building commissioner. So that, to me, seems as though if anything's even similar to what's above, that it could be allowed there. Because even us saying, well, if it's not on the table, it's not allowed, they're one part of the NRCC.
So my response to that would be, traditionally, if a use is defined within a zoning ordinance, so we have now defined this, it doesn't exist right now. If we had absent any regulations and somebody wanted to make a claim that manufacturing a product with marijuana in it is similar to manufacturing a product with cheese in it or something else, and that's allowed in the NRCC, then it should be allowed here. We have now taken that out by adopting an ordinance that specifically defines this use. You do not, you're not capable of bootstrapping that language to get you into the NRCC. It's not similar now. We have specifically designed areas and protocols and definitions. And if you don't fit that, you can't use that language to bootstrap in within the NRCC. We're more than happy to add express language, as was just discussed, to make that point even clearer. But it's not going to be the wild, wild west in the NRCC, meaning, oh, we didn't include you, so we're somehow secretly allowed in by using that language. No way. In zoning law, if it's specifically designed, specifically defined and set out in a zoning ordinance, now you know where those table of uses apply. And our zoning ordinance says, in many places, if it's not in the table of uses, it's considered to be prohibited, not allowed.
So even though NRCC as a whole, it just has general descriptions more so versus the regular use table?
Yep.
So that's more of a broad category for that. Okay, so it still wouldn't be allowed. But in terms of this too, if a separate order were to be submitted to update the NRCC part, in terms of our whole timeline for this, where would it be?
I mean, I'd like to think we could get to it by spring with respect to the recreational or adult use marijuana, incorporating that in. There's a few other parking lot items that I know that that Tom Daniel has mentioned to me, and that we should try and tackle and have conversations. Whether it's the parking requirements, I'm sure, frankly, I'd love to, reach out to the planning board and the ZBA, places that we've typically dealt with. There's some specific language in the NRCC about separate entries for every unit, and I don't have the exact language on the top of my head, but there's some areas that we should look at to refine, to improve it, and actually have it accomplish what I think the goals of the NRCC plan were. But again, I think it should be an open discussion with residents who helped craft that, with members of the planning board, and let us tease those things out and bring them to the city council, and obviously work with you to make sure it incorporates language that seems to be supportive.
Thank you, Madam President. I think in general, it actually would be pretty smart to include that area. Mm-hmm. If you look at the NRCC, they're looking for renewable energy and access to things based on the water, pedestrian traffic. Liquor stores are allowed there. Actually, I'm not sure because it says something about what's prohibited and then an N. I don't know if the N means no, it's not allowed, or if yes, it's not allowed. I'm not sure with that prohibited part. For the use for NRCC, but in general, it seems like you're close to the downtown, it's still separated, and it has different resources. So when the buildings there used to be used for different uses, have the heights, and I think there's a lot of possibility there. It would be nice to have that as part of this whole package, though, if it could go forward. I don't know the appetite of others on the council for that area, but even to move forward with this part, but get the next part in for discussion on that sooner versus later, because just in case something does come up there, we're having the discussion beforehand. In general, it does have a lot of nice assets.
Counselor, when you say to get it started, you mean to incorporate it into this draft?
It wouldn't be, you have to do a new order for the
right.
joint
That's
public
what I
hearing.
mean.
Yes.
Right.
There's already something else that got sent to a joint public hearing at a meeting 2 meetings ago.
I just don't know that we'd have the opportunity short term to talk with residents who, I know there's an active citizenry that would want to know more, especially about some of these other areas. In many respects, the NRCC, while it wants to be mixed use and incorporate these things, then it has specific requirements that exactly fly in the face of trying to attract what it purports to want to do. So that's the area where we want to tease out some of those, in particular, concerns with attracting the types of uses it wants that stand in the way of that, and see if we can make some course corrections along the way. That could be part of nothing to do with marijuana use, but then incorporate that obviously into into the same ordinance amendment and put that forward. And I don't want to make it sound like it's overly complicated. We're not trying to do anything devious or
There's timelines.
underhanded. Pardon
We
me?
have timelines and other parts to move forward.
Yeah, for sure.
Councilor Terrio.
Thank you, Madam President. I think just to try and get this back to the, back onto focus here. So we're all pretty clear that we'd like to see the NRCC be addressed, and the administration supports doing that, but wants to try and bring that out within other other changes to the NRCC that hopefully could come to the council early in the coming year, because there will be time for, there will be a need for feedback and all the like. But for now, based on the definitions here and the way the use regulations go, all those would be currently prohibited in the NRCC by its nature, just by definition. So, we should probably bring this back onto the zones that we do have here within the table for now. And, I think we have a commitment to try and address the NRCC and some of the other issues with that, in this coming year. So, let's, hopefully we can stop on the NRCC and get this back into the, focus back on the other zones that we were talking about here, so.
Any other? Councilor Giroux.
Thank you. Excuse me. Chair, President? President, right? Okay. So I guess on that note, if we can talk about why, or can we talk about changing for B5 for the marijuana retail to BA instead of N? I think we talked about it in the last meeting, that if liquor stores are allowed downtown, why wouldn't, and if this is being treated like a package store, then why wouldn't we allow a marijuana retailer downtown?
I mean, I could just share with you the internal conversations we had were very much be on the one hand and then on the one hand. And I would just say that the fear as to why we kept it out was that we have a lot going on downtown, lots of events, lots of festivals, and the difference with the edible products that you don't necessarily know if someone's drinking an open container. You can see that, although I'm sure there's other things in Dunkin' Donuts cups at times. But that was the difference maker, I think, from a public safety perspective, was lots of folks downtown, lots of edibles, opportunities for people to be impaired with large quantities. Do we want to start there? And we erred on the side of, okay, no, we've got lots of other areas. It wasn't certainly any attempt to put something in neighborhoods or create such a bottleneck that it limited interest. We know there's interest. We hear from the industry that they want to go where they're wanted, in essence. I don't think they want to wage battles. They have to get a letter of non-opposition. They've got to work collaboratively with the community. So I think people want to be where they're wanted in areas and where communities want them. I'd also say to you that downtown's a neighborhood. Just because you move downtown, you expect a livelier lifestyle, but there's a lot of people who do live downtown. And there was just some level of concern. This is the first time we've stepped into this foray of, what it would mean when we have large-scale events and activities happening. We know that we're obviously a busy place in October. What would that mean from a public safety perspective? Are there more things that we need to be mindful of? That was the one hand, right? The other hand was me putting my financial hat on and saying, give the people what they want, and if it's downtown, that's a commercial district, we have package stores, that's where we're going to make the most money, to be quite honest. That's where we have the most people. But this is the first time we're doing this, and so we erred on the side of introducing it without the B5. If the council feels strongly that the B5 should be here, we have talked with the chief and public safety and internally and said, okay, we'll make that work. Yes, it would be through the Board of Appeals. I think that would make the most sense to be consistent with what we've done considering the other zones. And we'll make it work. But I'm just giving you where we were at, and I have said I have been of two minds of this. On the one hand, it makes perfect sense to put it downtown. On the other hand, I understand the trepidation, given the large amounts of people that congregate here, the large-scale activities we have, and it's a lot to manage, and we thought we'd take it a little bit slower.
Councilor Turiel, Councilor Ripley.
Thank you, Madam President. So I'd say this, I will agree with my colleague here that given, and given, I understand the concern about edibles, but, and small scale consumption, but Given what I see downtown just for nip bottles, which are similar small consumption items, I don't really have that kind of concern in the downtown. I would want to see this amended when it coming before us. I'm not sure what I can't recall is whether, because we haven't done it this sort of way before, is if that amendment would take place at the
When it comes back.
When it comes back to us. So I would want to amend this to allow the Board of Appeals, with Board of Appeals in the B5, because we do have some safeguards in place with non-opposition and the ZBA to make sure that we don't have something located or built that's totally inappropriate downtown. The other thing that I would like to see us support is, again, the Board of Appeals process on testing facility in the B5, because we already have one.
Mm-hmm.
So I would, rather than making that a prohibited use, I would just soon, make it obviously the existing business is grandfathered, but I would like to see that be a Board of Appeals for really just to do it cleanly. And the other question that I would ask about the uses, we have manufacturing is not to be allowed by this in the B2 or B4 zones, but cultivation is. And I would think cultivation is a larger scale operation than manufacturing would likely be.
I think we were just keeping it consistent with how we currently have manufacturing in those zones. So that's the same thing, Counselor, as well with B5. And we went through the same analysis that you did. We already have a testing facility in B5. Why not incorporate it? And we erred on the side of wanting to be consistent in how we treated these categories. And that's how we ended up with a no there. But again, we're more than willing to better understand how we can adapt from this proposal to perfect it in a way that both counselors and the planning board feel are important.
Yeah, I just wonder if there's any, potential use. Again, I don't know that Salem is suddenly going to be overwhelmed with product manufacturers and cultivators. I have my doubts about that. I think most cultivation especially will happen mainly out in more rural areas where the land is cheaper. So
I think we just went through the exercise of, how come we don't allow testing of other facilities or cultivation or manufacturing of other facilities in those zones? And that's how we landed in the space that we landed with it.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
But understand what you're saying.
Yeah, the B5 is my major concern on that. So
Got it.
Councilor Rupley.
Thank you, Madam President. Going along with what the Good Word 6 counselor had mentioned, I actually have a question regarding what do we presently do with package stores in B5? Is that something that's as of right, or is that a Board of Appeals issue?
I believe it's as of right. I'm going from memory here. It's as of right, and there are a number of requirements from the state statute with respect to distances, or notification, I should say, for churches, schools, and facilities and the like.
So my question is, why wouldn't we have that as of right within the B5 district? Because I can guarantee that the state will come down with some of the most strenuous regulations that they possibly can, and it will, if it's not in line with alcohol, it's going to be more strict than alcohol. Why wouldn't we do that with B5? So I'm actually, if Board of Appeals is the only level of support that we have at the council, that's what I'll support. But I really have a problem with this not being as of right downtown. Similarly, do we not, in terms of the concerns that people might have regarding establishments that serve either edible products or smoking or what have you, would there be an opportunity for review to take place with our licensing board? Wouldn't that be something that would go in front of the licensing board?
We don't know that that's going to happen with the state. It looks like it's going to be strictly a state process at this point.
We will have no control over the licensing of marijuana establishments.
I think we'll be precluded. Right.
Okay.
So we do actually have a lot more regulatory control of places that either sell packaged goods or bars selling alcohol for consumption on premises, in that you have the ability to pull back licenses, to issue penalties or take disciplinary action in the event someone's selling inappropriately or over-serving that you don't necessarily have. We will be precluded from, at least at this point.
I just look at the table of principal and accessory uses, and I don't see a single one that's as of right. And that for a retailer.
Yep.
And that's problematic to me.
And the exercise we went through is that there is no licensing board that has a bit of local, I guess I would say, regulatory approval. We don't, that is precluded with the state statute. They'll have their own set of rules, but I wouldn't want the ABCC in charge of our local consumption. And so, look, you're still not going to have it. The Board of Appeals would be your only shot to hear from residents as well, who might be concerned about what's going on there. I mean, you know, it's a special permit, so the standards aren't the same as a variance. You know, it's a lower threshold in terms of wanting to give people an opportunity to weigh in. Otherwise, if it's as of right, you just go get your building permit and come down, and if there are any issues or concerns, they don't go noted. There's really no way for us locally to address them. If you did have a Board of Appeal process, it's also a great way for the operator to talk about what they're going to do to address any issues or concerns that folks may have. And we don't want to overthink it, but a special permit process is actually usually a pretty helpful way to engage neighbors and you know, the community at large with this issue. And it is a new industry here. I know it's not new everywhere, and we're not starting from the place of we don't want it. We're starting from the place of how do we make sure we do it right. And that was the thinking behind that, Councilor. Did you want to pick up on the package stores? Or no? Okay.
Any other questions? From the planning board? No? No questions? Councilor Vermico.
Yes, Madam Chair President. One other question. And I bet one other counselor next to me might know this answer. For state building code, aren't there requirements by the type of building material and what's considered hazardous and whatnot, and what can go into place based on even the building structure and what you're storing, what you're not? Mm-hmm. And is this part of this? Like, even though we allow these by use, like, is it currently defined what this is considered and what's needed and whatnot?
I don't think of anything, the raw materials being hazardous, but perhaps if there's a manufacturing, you know, process that's using flammables or something else, that would have to be addressed as part of the building inspection and building
like
code.
The materials of the walls and the building itself.
We're not there yet.
Yeah.
Okay. But later on, depending on what the state puts in place, could limit us more or add more. Mm-hmm. Or I guess limit, perhaps.
Limit or really specify what the expectations are.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Dibble.
Thank you, Madam President. The Ward 5 councilor and I both received correspondence from Salem State University's president, John Keenan, today, stating that he was not in favor of having such facilities located near the university itself. And as I said the last meeting, I'd like to see universities and colleges added to the list of semi-protected areas. K-12 schools is one of them, parks and playgrounds. Right now, as I understand it, it's 500 feet. 500 feet is not a long distance at all. It's a pretty short distance, actually. So we might want to discuss and increase that up to maybe 1,000 feet or whatever the body wants. We're just thinking whatever distance is that we find is appropriate for protecting our K-12 schools, our universities, our parks and playgrounds, and the other items that are on the list as well. Some of the comments earlier about whether we delay this or not, we have 4 new city councilors coming on board, 2 of which represent Highland Avenue, a third represents the majority of Bridge Street and the downtown, and then a fourth, the at-large councilor, ran on a platform of inclusiveness, if you would, and he might have comments from our Hispanic neighbors that live within the city of Salem. I think it's appropriate that these 4 new councilors, especially where they have to live with what's going on here, that they should have a say in this as well, and the public hearing should be left open to them when after they're sworn in January. I asked this at the last meeting to continue it into January. We have at least one of those councilors here tonight. Perhaps he'd like to speak, I'm not sure. But these 4 councilors should have a say in this because this is going to be a big part of Salem. So 1,000, if you can speak to the 1,000 foot and keeping that away from universities, if we can expand it from 500 to 1,000 and separating it, having these facilities away from K-12 schools, as is already part of the document. And by the way, nice job on this document to all the parties that helped write this. And I'm a firm believer in planning and having taken proactive steps. So, Mayor, I applaud you for bringing this forward. I think this is a very, very good start that is almost complete, just needs a little tweaking. So good job on this. With regard to the 500 feet, to make sure that parks and playgrounds are included, colleges and universities, and that we consider, or at least discuss, increasing it from 500 feet to 1,000 feet. Thank you.
Just
Councilor
generally,
McCarthy. Oh, sorry.
That's a question.
generally, I think we're, as we've mentioned before, trying to look at this as a similar industry. And the one area we're struggling with, notwithstanding Salem State's desires not to have a facility located close to them, they also have a package store and have historically, like directly across the street, that I may have, patronized on occasion.
I'd like to remind the mayor that the package store was there before Central Campus came on board.
But it wasn't there before main campus. I mean, it's certainly within 500 feet of.
It's further than 500 feet away
From
main campus.
From main campus?
Absolutely. It's
So,
over 1,000 feet.
I guess my point is, we're trying to be mindful of how many things we're trying to balance here. We've talked about wanting to treat this like a package store, but then wanting to have more onerous requirements than we might have for a package store. I believe we put in place notice as a requirement, which I think allows anyone who has anyone from the university or from a park, a playground, a childcare facility, obviously some of those are written into the state law, to come forward. And again, another reason to have a Board of Appeals process. I don't think this industry wants to go into places where it's hand-to-hand combat to get it done. If they know there's going to be opposition from a university, or I think, frankly, from any institution, I think those are the places they're going to shy away from going, because I think they want to be in places that they're welcome. They've got a long road to hoe. We're only one aspect of permitting at the local level. They've also got to get to the state level, and they've got to get a letter of non-opposition. And I want to speak to that for 1 minute, because it's not part of any zoning ordinance, but it is a process that we have laid out that would say that we, as a city, won't issue a letter of non-opposition unilaterally as the administration, and we'd ask the council not to do that unilaterally either, that we would work together, meaning for anyone to get a letter of non-opposition, they'd have to have the support of the city council and the mayor. And I would think if you objected, that, or any ward councilor objected to a site for reasonable, rational reasons, that their colleagues would support them or the administration would support them. So we do have a lot of protections in place. Adding additional distance and adding additional requirements and descriptors may end up doing more harm than good if we start limiting the areas that anybody can go. When you start thinking about 1,000 feet from a park, a playground, a school, and a college, we're only 8 square miles. We're pretty tightly, tightly constrained. And so that's the only, I guess I'd want you to think about that. We talk about wanting to treat it like a package store, except here, except there, or not there. And we've got lots of other levers in terms of our ability to weigh in on areas of concern that we might want to think about using, as opposed to shoehorning it into a zoning ordinance that might make it difficult. So.
Yeah, just to follow up for me. As I said previously, I'm in opposition of having the facilities close to Salem State University, or I'll say university and colleges in general.
Yep.
And I'd like to see that added to it, and especially after we received correspondence today from the president stating clearly that he is in opposition of it being located near the university.
Right.
So I think we need to add, at a minimum, if we don't increase the 500 to 1,000,
Incorporate it into the 500.
include universities and colleges with parks and playgrounds and K-12 schools, et cetera, from the list.
Okay.
Councilor McCarthy, Councilor Repley, Councilor Terrio, Councilor Famico.
Thank you, Madam President. Just so we're all clear, in section 6.10.6, general provisions, number 5 is the one that the Ward 7 Council specifically is referring to. And just for clarification, because in the middle of it, it says nursery school, comma, or playground. And nowhere does it say park. Can we make sure park is added in there? Because some parks don't have playgrounds. Thank you. Just a clarification, some parks don't have playgrounds.
Correct.
So so it's not ambiguous, because we've all said it. I just want to make sure that when we're reading through the document that it gets in there. And I know, if I may, Madam President, just to remind everyone of the process, I know a lot of people know, but for those people who don't know, is we have a joint public hearing. This is a continuation of one the other night. We close the public hearing, we send it to the planning board. They have X amount of time to debate it on their end. Then they send it back to us, and then we vote on it. And to the good Ward 7's concerns, if his concerns are the fact that the new members of the city council aren't going to get a chance, the chances of the planning board referring it back and then us acting on it before the December 5th meeting are about 0. So by the time this actually comes up to a vote of the city council, it's going to come back after the first of the year, and any of those new members of the city council will have a vote at that point. It was their choice not to be part of this public hearing. I give the at-large council a lot of credit for sitting over there, but any other member of the city council, if they so choose, if they wanted to be part of this discussion, it's an open public hearing to the public, which means public, elected officials, newly elected officials that haven't been sworn in yet. Can be all brought up to speed, but when it ultimately comes for the vote, the 4 new people are going to be the ones having the vote. So let's be clear on that, because I don't see anyone calling a special meeting of the city council after December 5th to take a vote on this. So it's going to happen sometime. By the time the planning board deals with what they have to deal with and they have their discussion. But let's be all clear, once the public hearing is closed, there's no more the public comment debate about the issue is allowed. If someone wants to email me and voice their opinion, obviously that's allowed. But when it comes to a public discussion, the planning board's going to have their meeting. They're going to discuss it among themselves. They're going to make their recommendations, put it in a document, and they're going to send that document back to us. This is their recommendation. Then we're going to take that information, we're going to process that, then we're going to have a debate amongst ourselves, and then we're going to take a vote on it. So the chances that happen before December 5th, I don't think so. Maybe, but I don't think so.
Councillor Epley, Councillor Turiel, Councillor Famico.
Thank you, Madam President. On the issue of having a setback for universities and colleges, I just have a problem with that. And with all due respect to President Keenan and to the good Ward 7 councilor, these are young adults. And young adults make their own choices. If they're eligible to vote, they're eligible to drink at age 21, they're eligible to smoke or imbibe under the new marijuana laws by age 21, if memory serves. They're adults, and we shouldn't be patronizing and paternalizing folks with our regulations. There will be a setback as of right wherever Horace Mann is located. There will be 1,000 feet from Horace Mann, if memory serves. Oh, 500? 500. Make that 1,000, I don't care, because you're talking about elementary kids. But we shouldn't be in the business of trying to overregulate college students, because they're adults.
Councillor Turiel, Councillor Famico.
Thank you, Madam President. So just to clarify a couple of things. First off, right now, the public hearing before us is strictly on the table of uses. So, we can open up some public discussion on that, but we have to handle these. We're mixing all the various topics of discussion. I want to clarify that partly for the body and partly for the people in the audience on this. We are not, we're mixing and matching here, but right now the only one of these that's technically open at the moment is the table of uses itself, which we were on at first. But so just to address that quickly. So besides that, back here in the, in 610.6 here within, within section 5, it does say, shall not be located within 500 feet of a pre-existing public or private school, or providing anything kindergarten through 12. That does cover Horace Mann. That covers much because of that. So that covers much of the Salem State North Campus as a result because of the zoning uses here and the fact that you're limited to B2 and B4, I and BPD by special permit. So, and then if they're within a location of 500 feet of any church, library, higher education, daycare, nursery school, etc., you have to provide notice, and before you can get the non-opposition and or the special permit. And that gives these bodies, if they are opposed to a location within that range, that gives them the opportunity to weigh in. I also will, go on record say, I understand, President Keenan's position on this, And I agree that we shouldn't have entities that are, these businesses opening up to service the Salem state market. I also think that given restrictions on the fact that marijuana use because of their federal status is prohibited in general, even though it is legal to, just to kind of back this up a second, right now it is legal for anybody over the age of 21 to possess and consume marijuana in Massachusetts. It has been for approximately a year. That's just the way the law is now. What is not permitted yet is the sale of this, and the conditions of that sale are what we're addressing here with what we're doing. So the sale, that part of it, adults over the age of 21 in Massachusetts right now are allowed to possess. And that's an important distinction. The people living, so a student living off campus is in fact allowed to go out and have it right now and smoke it or however they want to consume it in their own, in their property. So it's not going to be allowed on campus regardless of any means with smoking, ingesting there. And it's really going to be the same as liquor within that standpoint, although liquor is not allowed on campus except at functions where they get a special license for it. So we have that first in dealing with the university. In going, and the fact that it is prohibited, obviously they're buying it now. They're buying it from people now who are not selling it legally. And I expect that some of that behavior will continue, and there will be people underage probably trying to buy it, and there's going to be people still selling it not above ground. Hopefully that market will diminish significantly with this, and we will be able to, by having this process established, we'll be able to confine purchasing to people who are adults and purchasing it legally through where we have some control over it, where we have sanctions, where we have a licensing process, and where we have penalties. Because right now there's no control over the purchasing whatsoever. It's just something that the police are using resources to try and deal with. And even then, I think they're using minimal resources trying to deal with that, and they're concentrating on dealing with the really, really harmful drugs. There was approximately a week and a half ago, there was a heroin dealer bust right in front of my house. And they did a wonderful job the police did a wonderful job of catching the out-of-town dealers who came in. So there's a focus thing here, and I'd like to kind of bring us back to, to what we're dealing with. We're getting into Salem State, we're getting into a lot of things, and what we've lost sight of, I think, a little bit is what's happening right now and what's legal right now, and how we can move this stuff forward.
Council Famico.
Thank you, Madam President. Question, I guess, through you to the Ward 7 councilor, if that's allowed.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have a second question also. It actually takes into the solicitor. So I guess first through you to the assistant solicitor. She's still here? Hi, Vicky. And then I have a follow-up that's to the Ward 7. For one thing, if it's within 500 feet and it lists all these different areas, is that within rental use of that current property, or would that be considered within 500 feet even if it's a grandfathered use for some of these? I don't know if something's allowed by right across the board for these.
The uses that are listed in subsection 5 there?
Yep.
Yeah, those would be any uses that are current today, or at the time that the establishment is being proposed for that location. And just a quick point of reference, the 500 feet actually comes from the law. It's cited in here, section 5B3, and it states that a license will be issued so long as a location is not within 500 feet of a pre-existing public or private school providing education in kindergarten or any of grades 1 through 12, unless a city or town adopts an ordinance or bylaw that reduces the distance requirement, meaning that we can go less than 500 feet but not go up. And so that second paragraph of our section 5, providing the notice requirement, was a way to at least provide notice to all these entities in a broader way. And we could actually change, the 500 feet, we can, for the notice, we can even go to 1,000. We could go to a different amount, but I'm a little concerned about deviating from the 500 feet that's dictated in the in the statute, even though that's about licensing, not so much about local control, but I think it's a benchmark for what's reasonable, or what the law determines is reasonable. That's why the 500 feet is there for the K through 12. But I believe that a notice requirement that provides notice to all the types of entities that counselors are concerned with, and a distance requirement for that would address the concerns that I think I'm hearing here. And that's why that second.
Does the notice go to only the property owner, or if it's somebody who runs a daycare that's licensed, but they don't own the building, they rent the space, do they both get the notice?
I'm not sure how that works right now in terms of abutter notices.
It's the property owner now under the statute, but we could certainly make sure it's the property owner along with the operator, you know.
Okay. So that would mean for the case of this, then, if a property is rented by an institute of higher education, if that proposal would mean, even if it's providing education, if it's office space, that barrier would go with that as well.
I think that, yes. I mean, we could amend this to reflect the fact that you want it to be the property owner and operator within a greater distance. But I guess we want to be clear, the state law has a 500-foot requirement that I don't know that we can go beyond that as a requirement for location.
Right.
This notice is on top of.
So does that, I'm just saying, if it's a higher education and they have office space someplace, but it's still an institute that's renting and it's just purely offices, would you still have that 500-foot barrier?
Well, the 500-foot barrier only applies to K through 12 in the statute, okay?
Or a notification.
The notification would go to any higher ed or childcare operator or park or playground as we've identified. And again, then the letter of non-opposition is really a key gatekeeper opportunity for us as a community, and that's one of the reasons I think we want to make sure that both the city council and the mayor have to sign off on that.
Just wondering for the rentals and office space for that. And then the final part, and this takes into the Good Ward 7 counselor. Do we have anything that specifies what a park or playground is? I know in the last couple of weeks there's been a little bit of social media uptick with if something was considered park space or not. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering what narrows that down, because we have our open space and rec plan, we have our public parks and playgrounds and school playgrounds. That by making it park, would it then open up elsewhere? How do we break that down?
The city has a listing of all parks, correct?
But then there's also private parks within the city.
We took it to mean any dedicated parkland or area used for recreational purposes managed by the city, you know? Is the common a park or is the common play space a playground? I would say yes. It's owned by the city. It's a public area. I don't think we were taking into account private parks or recreational areas.
Okay, so then a park, then if it's dedicated parkland, could that be conservation land in some places?
Typically, it's either parkland or city land that's used for recreational purposes. So the common is not dedicated parkland, but it is city land used for recreational purposes. Dedicated parkland.
Would it be possible to get a list of what those are within our city?
Yeah.
Perfect. And then just to tag into that, so the Good Board 7 counselor knows, I was just seeing if by making it park, if there was a definition where it would really be then allowing anything with everything else, but I guess it depends on what we get back. Thank you.
Councilor Giroux.
Thank you, Madam President. With the medicinal marijuana facility, this park playground question, this also came up because it's pretty much across the street from Mac Park. However, because the law says to be 500 feet from the playground being where children will most likely congregate,
right?
It is outside that 500 feet radius, and so that's why the facility that actually I never hear complaints about that facility. Granted, we're talking about a different type of facility, but again, with very similar requirements of distance requirements, I should say, that it was very specific about the playground because, I mean, the park, you want to, I mean, for something like this, like if you're going to keep it from children, you want to make sure it's where they're congregating. So I strongly support keeping that term playground in and not getting into the ambiguous park.
Councilor McCarthy.
Thank you, Madam President, where I agree with the Ward 6 Council on that, I have a specific, unique situation in my ward, being Salem Willows. I can tell you on any day of the year, there are more kids, in the summertime, there are more kids in the Willows than there are any other park in the city combined at one day. And if you're going to take that specific definition, the line, as we all refer to it in the Willows, is zoned so that one of these uses would be allowed. And then more kids in the Willows in the summertime than there are in every park in the city combined throughout the whole year. So, as much as I appreciate that definition of playground, I'll be building a playground across the street from the line next year if we have to, because to fit into that definition, because there is a large volume of children specifically in that park, which there is no playground in the park, in the Willows, but there are lots of opportunities for kids. So I don't know how that fits into the definition, but it's going to be covered somehow. It has to be covered somehow, just for clarification. And that was why specifically I brought up the word park earlier, because the Willows is a deeded park. It has all the protections. It was deeded in 1891 or whatever year it was.
And it's B2.
And yes, so.
I mean, I think the tricky thing for us is...
Oh, there's a lot. I mean, there's a big tricky thing with everything about this, but...
Well, but the idea here is to try and design regulations that are reasonable. We're a small city. We're bumping into each other all the time in various areas, and at the same time, wanting to make sure we're keeping out the things in the locations that we don't want, and that, I can't say enough, the gatekeeper role. We're talking about 3 licenses, right? So that's the cap right now. Assuming ATG, which they have an automatic right to 1, that's 3 other licenses. Where they go once they're set up, I don't think this is going to be an enduring issue we're dealing with forever, because I think, frankly, those 3 licenses are probably going to be highly sought after in an early phase here, and the role of having the letter of support or non-opposition is pretty critical. So we need to figure it out, but I guess I want to make sure the council knows we're not going to be able to figure out every single potential scenario of where somebody might go, and that's why the letter of non-opposition process enables us to, if necessary, address those areas of concern that as a community we may have, that don't fit within the constraints of something we could have possibly thought of, or something could move, a higher ed institution could move in, or a school could get set up, or a daycare facility somewhere. You know, those things are going to change probably more frequently than where a recreational use facility wants to set up shop.
Any other questions? Councilor Dibble.
Thank you, Madam President. Through you to our planner. I'm jumping the gun on this one, but I'm going to ask the question. At an upcoming joint public hearing with the planning board and the council, we're discussing possibly allowing a property within Ward 7, but we could say citywide, doesn't matter, to adopt the state regulations of a small farm zoning from 5 acres down to 2 acres. With that, and it's just a clarification for my mind and for my fellow councilors, with that, if this property is allowed to become a small farm and follow the state zoning laws, and this is a statement, I'm asking for clarification, would they be exempt from the local zoning laws and everything that we're doing here, and they could adopt these 4 different marijuana practices here within that zone if they follow the state zoning law? And if it's no, then please explain why it's no.
So as the marijuana cultivation is not considered an agricultural use. It is not an agricultural use. In the law. Currently, it is not.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? No? Okay. Councilor Terry?
No, I'm just saying we'll hear from the public.
That's what I was just going to say. Okay, so we're going to open it up to public comment, couple different things. I see some familiar faces here. So I would ask two things from anybody who's giving any public testimony, whether you're in opposition or in favor, that you limit your comments to what we're discussing, which is the table of uses here. And secondly, if you can limit your comments to 2 minutes. And if you've spoken before, we've heard you before, so if you can just try not to be repetitive. I know we heard you the first time. So we're going to start on this side. Yes, Councilor-elect. Name and address for the record, please, sir.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Domingo Dominguez for the record. Thank you for allowing me to speak out. I believe that what I just hear here is make a lot of sense to move this matter to the next council, new elected council, because I think that minority is not represented here. I think that being a minority and I've been in the minority group, I think it's a lot to be impacted to the minority group, so we need to make sure that we hear from them and we're allowed to have some voice. So I believe that this that had to be moved to the next council on January. That's my proposition, and I ask you to consider that on behalf. Thank you.
Thank you. Go around the room.
Hi, Michael Latulip, once again, 190 Bridge Street. I think the discussion here today is very productive. I honestly, I'm going to support this, I think, with the change to B5. I think that would be great, opening up the map to a lot more businesses. But with that, I do want to kind of echo what Councilor-elect just said. And I'll read through some of my comments here. And specifically, as I read the law, it's possible for a marijuana applicant that demonstrates experience in community and economic empowerment in communities disproportionately affected by marijuana prohibition. It allows them to have a fully operational business by July 1st, 2018, along with the medical marijuana treatment centers that are already operational. So we have a real opportunity, I think, in Salem to kind of roll out the red carpet for these economic empowerment organizations. They're going to be looking for host communities to put and apply their businesses in. And a lot of these groups are going to be represented by minorities of all sorts, women, veterans, you name it. So, opening up these zones would be tremendous. I also would like to say that, removing the section that bars cannabis use inside of an establishment would be highly recommended, because a lot of the new business licenses that the commission is going to make available to these smaller business owners are going to be on-site consumption related businesses. So if we want to have these small business applicants, we need to certainly eliminate that restriction on these establishments. And I heard a lot of discussion on, the downtown area and the events and so forth that go on in these areas. But the truth of the matter is that we want to keep marijuana from getting into the hands of children. And by having package stores set up in that fashion, we're basically forcing parents to take marijuana home to their children. And by having on-site consumption legalized and zoned in the city, probably similar to a bar, it would probably prevent a lot of parents from needing to take cannabis home with them and exposing their children to marijuana. Furthermore, the further changes that should be made include unreasonable and practicable barriers that are for the marijuana cultivation, manufacturing, and testing facilities. Okay, I'm good. I'm getting close to the end. I just want to say that the law makes it very clear that we cannot put unreasonable and impracticable barriers, and the suggestion that these facilities have to generate power on site for manufacturers and for cultivation centers is what I would consider unreasonable and could likely trigger something from the Attorney General's office or from the commission themselves to reprimand the city if it were to in fact engage in those proposals. So, and with that, I would also like to say that, you know, we really should have some moving forward with this ordinance without changes, I elaborate on, and before minority representation has a voice on the council this January, could be, in my opinion, a terrible tragedy for the city of Salem. So with that, I will end. Thank you.
Thank you. Continue around, Polly?
Polly Wilbert, 7 Cedar Street. I just want to comment on the inclusion of parks at a possible point in the discussion. I think in conjunction with the university's requirement under federal law that they be a marijuana-free zone, and knowing that the university wants to increase its on-campus population to half of the student body, which means somewhere between 4,500 and 5,000 students, and knowing that a significant component of that body is going to be 21. What we need to recognize is that in that juxtaposition, the burden is likely to fall on the neighborhood when those students want to leave campus so they don't get in trouble on campus to consume marijuana in whatever mode it's consumed. We already have a burden in the surrounding neighborhoods from students who are abusing alcohol. It is not a stretch to imagine that we're going to have issues with marijuana. I think we need to be thoughtful about that. Knowing our experience with alcohol, let's not assume it's going to be totally different with marijuana. We have a lot of parks without playgrounds. We have a lot of open space, green open space that could be considered parks. I get that the list of parks is going to be helpful, but if these students go to those areas to consume, the burden's going to fall on the neighborhood. Whether you're walking your child, taking your child in a stroller, walking your dog, however, that's not necessarily conducive to what you want to be dealing with in the neighborhood. So I just ask you to consider that. I hear what Michael's saying about small business operators, and I know that one of the discussions in Boston has been about the equity issue for small property owners. At this point, I believe B1 is not considered as an option for this zoning. As a result, you are forcing this to be more moneyed operators. You are disallowing the opportunity for equity from lower income individuals, small business owners, without the inclusion of B1. Now, B1 is also more likely to be in the neighborhoods, but I think we need to be thoughtful about that unless you want this to just be the casinos, the big operators to come in, and whether or not that's what we think is fair. That's not how we approach liquor stores. And so I think there's an equity issue here for us to consider as you make judgments about how this is going to be approached. So I would just ask you, I know that sounds maybe contradictory, but I just would ask you to keep both of those considerations in mind as you move forward in this conversation.
Thank you. Gary?
My name is Gary Gill. The reason we're here tonight is because I brought this topic matter up to all of you a good while back, almost a year ago.
Gary, can we get your address, please? Can we get your address?
12 Pope Street, Salem. Sorry about that. I always forget that, so I'm new at this. But the reason we're here is to talk about the stigma that goes along with it and the barriers that people would like to put in front of small business owners or the opportunity for this business to even exist in the city of Salem. When I went to Cheryl, city clerk, almost a year ago, I asked her, when was the last time that zoning was updated for the city of Salem, even before I told her what the topic was. We had a discussion. She said, yes, the zonings do need to be updated. It was 5 years that it hadn't been updated. So here we are to this day now. They need to be updated, Aaron. When I went to Aaron's office and brought all this to her attention, that distribution facilities wanted to come in, more dispensaries, package stores, smaller businesses for opportunities for people of minorities, women and veterans. That was all heard from Erin in her office, face to face from me. At that time, when I asked that question, I knew right off the bat, when I was asking for the business area for Zone 1 and Zone 5 to be open and to be considerate for small businesses for this topic, they looked at me like I had 3 heads. Well, let me tell you, you cannot expect to get the benefits from a 3% of any business in town if you do not give them proper zoning business areas. Now, within that, the State House has already said you cannot put barriers up to people that are handicapped. It needs to be handicap accessible. It needs to be easy to get to by public train, bus, or train. Train, bus, or cabs. So how can that be if you're in industrial areas, which Gloucester's getting one, we have Grove Street, all right, but we have a dispensary, we have a lab downtown already that thought it was in the right zone. Now you all come up and told them that it's not in the right zone. They're a big taxpayer. They're putting a lot of money in the city of Salem now, and now you want to rezone it to fit your purposes. It doesn't work that way. And you all know it don't. So when you're putting up barriers, you need to educate yourself on the topic. You need to open up your mind a little bit and listen. And from that point on, you'll be able to learn. It's not all about the edibles. Of course, we don't want the edibles to get in the hands of kids. That's why everything Michael and Nicole and everybody's working at the State House, that's first priority. No playgrounds, none of that. Okay, 1 second. So that is the first concern, not in kids' hands. It's all going to be safety with the police department and everybody else. Mary Butler knows that I'm for that as well, that we can't give that to our kids. But we do have a very bad drinking problem here in town, don't we? We find fireball bottles all over the place. So, you know, you have to take the good and the bad and you have to make it work. And that's why we're coming to the city council, people, so you all will do the right thing for the right people. And keep that in mind. We're talking about patients with AIDS. That's why I'm here. My partner didn't die in vain to not let all this go through. We tried everything legally in our hands to get him a medicine card so he would be able to get that. And it failed because of all the circumstances of all the paperwork. So, thank you, President Miles.
Thank you. Thanks. Fuzzy?
Fuzzy, 4 Harrison Road. Actually, I don't know if it's more of a question than a comment. My main concern, I distinguish between medical and recreational. And medical, I have no problem with. Recreational, I have every problem with. And I feel it's going to bring more problems than benefit to the city or to any community. But then again, that's not my decision at this point. My question to you, when we do this, my main fear is what we just spoke about, the liquor store by Salem State or by any other thing, the grandfather in. And because of that, Grove Street can have recreational. I was wondering if we can put something in ordinance or something where if you open for medical, you cannot be grandfathered for recreational. You have to go with the process and with all the zoning that everybody else does it as that. It's like when you open a sub-store, if you want to add liquor in the future, doesn't matter, your sub-store being there, grandfather does not entitle you for the liquor license. It has to go with the other rules and everything, and I wonder if there is something we can do about medical marijuana facilities who want to open in the city where we can do the same thing. If you open as a medical, you want to go recreational, your location does not grant you anything, it has to go with the same rules and regulation as if somebody comes out of anywhere, and whatever applies to them has to apply to you. And if you are in the wrong zone, if you're in the wrong area, like this, I'm talking specifically like the one on Canal Street. This is what brings the thing. As medical, maybe it's not a problem, but as recreational, it doesn't qualify in any way, form, or shape. And this is where I think maybe we should just make it a rule for everybody. I don't know if that's legally possible or not, but I hope you look into it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Turry.
Thank you, Madam President. I'll actually address Fuzzy's concern there. So with a medical establishment, they have to have an agreement with the city in order to proceed and get their state licensing. And it's already been discussed in the case of that one specific proposal, and there's no reason why it can't be with any. In the case of Mayflower, one thing that that's on hold right now, but one thing that's been made very clear to them is, as part of their licensing process, they would have to agree to, in order to receive a license for the city, they would have to have a binding agreement that they will only seek to provide that one use for that facility, should they get it. And we can do that with any medical facility. What we're looking at on a city basis as a separate part of all this, we have this in our ordinances subcommittee right now, is adopting the 20% cap, which gives us 4, and depending on how you interpret it, everything, potentially 5 total licenses for the city. One of those by right goes to ATG if they want it. The remainder of those would be given out to businesses that come and apply and go through the process and go through the non-opposition from the city and go through the Board of Appeals special permit for whatever zones we do allow it in. So a company that comes in by medical, at this point, the only medical marijuana facility in the city that by right has the ability to get one is ATG. No other medical facility established after that has it by right. Because the way the law was written, the way the final law was passed by the state, only medical marijuana dispensaries that were in business before, I think it was July 1st of this year, qualify to get a grandfathered recreational permit should they choose. Everybody else has to go through the process if they want one.
But the zoning doesn't matter?
It's
This
not,
is my thing,
well, medical marijuana clinics by zoning wise fall under medical clinic for our zoning, which requires a special permit anyway. That's a zoning change that was passed in 2010. So there's already an established process for medical where they have to get a special permit wherever they're allowed to do business. Recreational, we're working on the terms there, but there's no process by which in any of this where a medical facility that we permitted separately would have the ability to convert without going through the whole licensing process and getting a separate non-opposition and a separate special permit for that. So we're covered in that regard.
Thank you.
Anyone else over here? No? Anyone speaking opposed? No? Okay. Councillor Epley.
Did I say Madam Chair?
I'm sorry, Councillor Epley, Councillor Sargent.
I'll defer to Councillor Sargent.
Thank you. Yeah, we're covered in the sense of what the laws are now. Just like with the home rule petition liquor licenses, at first, we put some in originally and they say they weren't transferable. It had to come before us before they could be transferred, and then the state put in the law that they could be transferred by state law at the same address. So the state changed the rules and they supersede us. So we can do this, and something can be put in legally by city law, city ordinance at the time, and current state law when it comes out. But the state can change it anytime they want to, and then that will supersede us. So once we adopt these, it's kind of a work in progress. Whatever the state decides to change, we have to go along with. So that's how this is going to go, I think.
Thank you.
Councillor Epley.
Thank you, Madam President. After listening to some of the public testimony, there are a couple of things that I know that I'm not going to be able to vote on this eventually, but I want to put my feedback into the rest of this body and perhaps to the good at-large councillor-elect. One of the things is I believe that we should have Board of Appeals ability for B1 for a marijuana retailer. We should have, the small businesses should have the ability to open up, and it is a matter of equity, as Ms. Wilbert had mentioned. So I would certainly hope that this council or the next council supports that. The other thing that I would be, at least for the B5 district, and perhaps not the other districts, I'll leave that for the board, for this council to decide and for the planning board to decide, but for B5, we should have an allowance of use for of on-site consumption. I didn't realize that that was in the proposed legislation. It does not make sense that we don't have on-site consumption. We're adults. Let's act like them. This is a free society. The voters of Massachusetts voted this in. Salem voted this in overwhelmingly. To Mr. LaTulip's point, he's absolutely correct. If you're consuming off-site, you're not around children. You're not bringing it home to being around children. And if there's a problem, then you can go back and forth to the Board of Appeals. That's the beauty of that permit, right? So I would certainly hope that this council includes a B1 designation for Board of Appeals as well as the B5, and that we have on-site consumption available downtown in the B5.
Councilor Terrio.
Thank you, Madam President. I'll just add to that. I have no issue inherently with the B1 being included within the Board of Appeals process. And I also don't have any inherent problem with having an on-site consumption. The bottom line for us, at least at this point, is we're likely talking about a total of 4 to 5 licenses citywide, however they're distributed. And should we get to the point where the proposals that come in, and this is assuming that on April 1st or whatever the date winds up being for applications, we're suddenly swamped with all our applications at once. Assuming that we get those in and we've had 4, ATG takes their license and we've had 4 others get into the pipeline, at that point, if somebody else wants to come in and get a on-site consumption license, they're out of luck because the licenses have all gone. So for that sort of, I think there will be a time in the future probably as we get more used to this and as eventually federal law starts to follow what states are doing, I think we'll get to the point where licenses are easier to come by. We may remove the cap at some point. We may, treat this differently. At this point, I don't think it's going to be a major issue either which way because we're talking about such a small number of licenses, likely. But, I am fine with the B1, and that is with a small piece of B1 directly across the street from my house. And there's another couple of B1s that are, we were talking about the small business. There's a couple B1s a couple of doors away from Ms. Wilbert's house. And there's a lot of that neighborhood business throughout the city. I don't really have a major problem either which way with it because ultimately we're talking about a very small number of licenses, likely, at least at this point. And again, we're at the beginning of a process that's going to take years to play out. Massachusetts has just gone down this path and is just starting to do what other states have already done, and we're doing it stricter than other states have generally done it.
Councilor Sargent.
Thank you, Madam President. Just, I think the B1 is just a matter of consistency with the alcohol licenses. Liquor sales aren't allowed in B1 currently, and a restaurant with alcohol is allowed in B2. And in many, if not most cases in the city, B2 is just across the street from B1. So it's not much of an inconvenience to walk across the street to go to a restaurant, liquor store, or this new kind of store. So I think that, and again, to B5, it's the same thing with consistency. Liquor sales are allowed in B5, so thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Comments? Councilor Dibble, Councilor Fury? Or Councilor Fury, Councilor Dibble? I don't know who came first.
I have a caution. I think we should act. I drive a Volvo. And I think a P5 should be safety, safety, safety. I work at the PBD Essex Museum. We have a children's court facility in downtown Salem, a juvenile court system. We have more kids at any one time, as Councilor McCarthy said about the Willows. We have them all the time, 365 days in the B5 district. What message do we have as a community? We've worked so hard to build our B5 district to be an epicenter, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, to have on-site consumable products eaten in the downtown area. It's going to send a wrong message. We've come too far, too long. I think we have to eye on caution, on public health and safety, to keep it out of the B5. Juvenile court, PBS Museum, we have a new park on Derby Street going on. Wrong time, wrong place. We have to really delay or defer that to a long time. Put it in the back burner. Thank you.
Councilor Dibble.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. As opposed to what was in the newspaper misquoted, I am against the sale going into B1. B1 intention is to be mom and pop stores that immediately abut residential neighborhoods. So when we look at Ward 5, as was just brought up, those little pizza shops, little convenience stores have housings above it and all around it. But a short distance away along Canal Street, there's less housing, if you would, or more of a highway type of a B2 zone. Vinton Square, we have B1 and B2 across the street from each other. One area has housing right up against it, B1. The other area, B2, does not have housing right up against it, which, in my mind's eye, B1 is a residential type of mom and pop type of neighborhood. So I'm against this going into B1. With regard to the Ward 4 councilors' comments about B5 on-site consumption and Mr. LaTulip's excellent comments, I'm in full agreement on that. Again, I am against, and I personally voted against the marijuana issue, but it's here to stay, and we need to adopt common sense rules. I just want to point out that at Salem State University, North Campus dorms, Central Campus dorms, and South Campus dorms are all 100% within Ward 7. And with Salem State following federal rules, we'd be all foolish to think that the marijuana product is not going to enter onto the campus. But they're following rules that prohibit it because they're following the federal rules. So it's in violation of federal law to bring it onto the campus and against their policies, I'll say. So what does that leave the students that obtain this material, obtain marijuana, from doing? Sneaking it onto campus and maybe getting thrown off campus, maybe using it along the bike path, which is currently heavily used between Loring and Lafayette Street for marijuana smoking, or consuming it in neighborhoods if they can't consume it in the store that they buy it from. So beyond the B5, we should have a discussion, should we allow for in-house consumption of this material, like in a bar room, beyond just the downtown? Because seriously, where are these students that can legally buy it? Where are they going to legally consume it? It's in the neighborhood because that's all that's left. The good Ward 5 council brought up several times the chart that is before us. Let's make some progress tonight and look at the changes that we want to make to this chart, and instead of just talking all night long. I've talked probably more than most anybody in this room, but let's look at some of the B's, the BAs, excuse me, let me make sense of this. Some of the yeses, some of the nos, and some by special permit from the Board of Appeals. And we discussed, I have some notes here from the last couple of meetings. And if I may, Madam President, really fast, under the B2, marijuana testing facilities, we previously discussed it where it says yes now, instead of making it by right, to make it by Board of Appeal approval. The same thing under BPD, marijuana testing facility, not by right, not a yes, but by, so we have protection, but by Board of Appeal approval. And then within the B5, the two no's at the bottom for testing facilities, which we have an existing facility, and the marijuana retailer, instead of making those no's, make them both BA, Board of Appeal by special permit. Those four changes, I think we all pretty much agreed to at our last meeting. I'd like to see them go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think we've pretty much exhausted the comments on this. I'd entertain a motion. I'm getting like mixed messages. Some people want to keep it open to a date certain. Other people want to move it forward, so Counselor Turiel was raising his hand.
Yeah, I would move at least, I don't know if we're done with everything, but at least in terms of the table itself, for us to get it back to make any amendments, we're going to have to get it through planning and back to us. So I would move the public hearing be closed.
Second.
Okay, Counselor Turiel moves that the public hearing be closed.
That on, just one clarification, please, if that's just on that.
On the
part
table.
of
On the table.
For starters.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any discussion? No? Okay, all those in favor? All those opposed? We got 1, 2, 3. Okay, the matter carries. Now the hearing's closed. Counselor Turiel.
And I further move that the matter be referred to the planning board for their recommendation.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? The matter carries. So that closes the first matter. Section 3.0, the table. Let's go to the next matter of Section 6.0, special regulations relative to marijuana establishments. Any questions on those? No? Okay. Any, Councilor Dibble?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. We discussed this earlier. Well, let's see, on the fourth page, number 5, which would be 6.10.6, excuse me, 6.10.6. I'm sorry, 6.10.6, number 5. The entire large paragraph there, whereas it says 500 feet, I am moving to change it to 1,000 feet. And within the section that says pre-existing public or private schools providing education in kindergarten or any grades 1 through 12, add to that list and colleges and universities.
Erin, or do
order.
you want to speak to that?
Point of order, Madam President. You can't make that motion at the public hearing?
Correct.
Yeah.
That's what my comment
was. That could be a request for what we do when it comes back to us, or for the planning board to make that change, but we cannot make that, we can't amend at the public hearing. We
Right.
can only.
Oh, is that what you were doing? You wanted to amend it?
I'll suggest that we change the 500 to 1,000 and we add colleges and universities to it, and that we add the word park just prior to or playground.
Okay, thank you for that suggestion.
Move to see it placed on file.
Any other comments? Councilor Famico.
Yes, Madam President, just a point of clarification to the Assistant Solicitor. With this zoning in general, whereas it's a public hearing, if something comes in, could you just clarify what could be done, like for changes even for the planning board with becoming more strict or less strict with what they refer back?
The planning board, once the public hearing is closed, has 21 days to review the matter and report back to the council, and the planning board will make a recommendation to the council. At that point, the council can take that recommendation and make whatever amendments to what it has before that it wishes, based upon the planning board recommendation or its own desires. But at this juncture, as Councilor Furriel said.
Right, but
we
even
can't
when
amend.
they have something, like say with some of this, if you went from, you published it as the public hearing as being 100 feet, and then you say, I'm just using as an arbitrary number, and you were to decrease it all of a sudden to 50 or increase it to 200, is that allowed for terms of the advertisement?
Yes, yes.
So what you're asking is if we can change the planning board's recommendation? Is that what you're asking?
Or even what is discussed later on. I thought earlier this year we had discussion with zoning and it came into numbers and what could take place with something becoming more strict versus what was brought in as the joint public hearing.
I'm not familiar with that. My understanding, and maybe Amanda can speak to this as well, is that if the planning board is going to make a recommendation, and that the council takes up that recommendation and can do with it as it sees fit.
Yeah, the zoning amendment has to be within the four corners of what was advertised. This entire zoning amendment was pretty much summarized within the advertisement. So there's some flexibility there. It didn't say 500 feet, so.
But the fact that the advertisement considered what distance we were talking about is enough for the council to be able to make a change. I think, as the city clerk once told me, it can come in as a chicken and come out as an egg.
Something like that.
Well played, Madam City Clerk.
We could change the whole world.
Councilor Epley.
Thank you, Madam President. Going in line with the good word 7, Councilor, I will make a suggestion rather than a motion to amend, but on within the same section, item 12 is the no marijuana shall be smoked, eaten, or otherwise consumed or ingested with any type of licensed marijuana establishment. I would just put to both the planning board and to the city council that either be stricken in its entirety or amended significantly to allow for consumption, at least in some select areas.
Thank you for that suggestion. Councilor Sargent, Councilor Famico.
Thank you, Madam President. I think that's just what we do. We make suggestions for food for thought for the planning board recommendations and let them run with it as they may. One I'd like to make, just because it's been with liquor licenses before and adult entertainment licenses, is to have them consider adding funeral home. Because sometimes what's next door to a funeral home and different activities, I don't think I would want to put in a bar room next to a funeral home. So just the possibility of adding that, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Famico.
Yes, Madam President, just with this, was brought up earlier, I'd like to know if it's playground or parkland, what is being looked at, and have the planning board to have that information when that's voted on, just to make sure with what's going forward with that. And additionally, just to tag into a discussion from earlier, if you also limit locations, it's actually, you become the survival of the richest no matter what. If you have a certain amount available and you're saying here's where it's available, all of a sudden those that can afford it and have the lawyers and everything will be the first at bat to get whatever licenses they are. And then later on you wind up with in the terms of our liquor store, our restaurants, our special ones for that. But just to know what the playground definition is for this. It was also mentioned during the last meeting for this in particular, just to look into those operational plans and where they're getting filed. And I'd actually like to see this amended, and it would be in a couple places, so I'm not going to make the amendment now, that whatever emergency plan also goes before the fire department, as I mentioned earlier. That's how all of our school emergency plans work. They're part of it from the beginning of it. And also mentioned, and I'm not going to make the amendments now, I don't think it needs to be in here that the Department of Planning and Community Development, that some of this emergency work is filed there. I think we put ourselves at a huge safety risk with more and more eyes on safety plans, especially with right now, because it's federally mandated, the amount of, it's in one part, Beth, but not another section that mentions it. I'm sorry, but Ward 6 Counselor. We go into safety plans and we just really open it up with all the money that's going in and out of these locations. It's federally done. It's a cash-based business. So just to take that into account, and it would come back to us to review that, but just to make sure we're looking at, no matter where this is, the absolute safety, because I don't think the safety is necessarily where people buy and consuming. It's a safety of cash and business operations.
Councilor Ripley.
On section 6.10.9, I actually have a question for our assistant city solicitor. This is the requirement specific to marijuana cultivation facilities. For lack of a better word, it's green on green, for green, something like that. So, Mass General Law, Chapter 94G, Section 12. Is this a state statute requiring that there be, for lack of a better term, environmental requirements provided on cannabis cultivation facilities?
It's not included in section 12. This is something that was the requirements, the green requirements you're
Yeah.
speaking of? Yeah, this is something that the planning staff came up with based upon research of other marijuana cultivation ordinances in other states.
Okay. I am normally a big environmental person, but I'm also very cognizant of putting very onerous requirements on new enterprises. And especially since we don't do this with our alcohol facilities here in town. You know, there's a certain profit margin that you hit, and I don't, with the taxes that are going to be hitting these facilities, both state and local, you know, I'm just cognizant of, do we really want to include that? I mean, because you're really, I mean, especially for a mom and pop. I mean, if you're talking about big money, a big money facility coming in, maybe that makes sense. But you're really pricing out small business folks, and that kind of goes along with what Mr. Latulip had mentioned and what Ms. Wilbert had mentioned.
So the assumption here is that cultivators are going to be larger scale growers, roughly 10,000 square feet or more. Taking a look at Boulder, Colorado and Denver, Colorado, when retail cultivation facilities first opened, they were experiencing power outages to such an extent that they do require 100% of their marijuana facilities, growing facilities, to offset 100% of their electricity, either through on-site renewable energy facilities, or they actually have something called the Community Solar Garden in Boulder, Colorado, whereby the city holds an offset, or the company has to buy into an offset to purchase solar or other types of renewable energies in the city itself, I should say in the county itself. So it is quite an issue. For 5 pounds of marijuana, it takes approximately a house worth of energy for an entire year to produce 5 pounds, and we're anticipating that we will be producing a lot more. Our cultivators will be producing a lot more and have quite the energy consumption in each one of these facilities. What I'm also trying to say is that this is not an unrealistic expectation. We have multiple examples from other states in the country where production facilities are fully complying with these standards, and the technology is there. Why not? Why not?
So, Madam President, through you, then what this sounds like is you're really wanting to target the large growers.
We anticipate that we'll have larger growers.
So wouldn't we want to have the specific provisions apply to square footages of X or higher?
You could.
And couldn't we then also say that anything below X would not have these requirements? And you can come up with whatever that magic number is, but if you're talking about a small grower who, again, it's a small mom and pop kind of thing, you know, maybe, I don't know what the number is. If it's 1,000 square feet, you know, maybe that's a small farmer or something. Well, it's not agriculture, sorry. But I guess my point is, I get your point about, you know, this does take a lot of energy especially for the high growers, and that's where the high money is, and so they can afford it. But the small grower isn't going to be able to afford to do this.
I agree with you on that. You know, we may have larger growers come in and say, why are you being so restrictive with us and not with our competitive growers at the same time as well?
In the 4 years I've been here, I've had no problem voting against Walmart and Target whenever they wanted to open up on Black Friday. If I were honored to do it for another 2 years or so, I'd probably do it the same way. Similarly, I'm going to do whatever I can for a small mom and pop. And that's what I think our planning department and what our city should be looking to do as well.
Councilor Terrio.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm fairly comfortable with that requirement because mainly I don't think, given the cost of real estate in Salem and given the density of Salem, I don't know how much. I know we need to have this definition and we need to have this usage table covered. I'm not sure how much cultivation is going to happen in Salem, just given the costs of production and given the need for space to do it. And, you know, even in some of the, and even given what we're seeing with the people who are doing cultivation in the medical marijuana field now, they're generally locating in, like ATG as an example, I believe they're growing out in Amesbury where they can get, where the real estate is a lot cheaper and they can get space. And most of the grow facilities seem to be out in the outer suburbs for that reason. So I don't know that we're going to have much in the way of cultivation, but I do have no problem really with requiring it. If we want to put in a square footage, if we want to put in a square footage divider, at which point that applies, that's fine. But I don't think it's really a big obstacle either which way. I think, you know, manufacturing is something that you could do here from just proximity to market. I think the testing facility, obviously that works because we already have one. And of course, retail is going to be fairly successful in this town, if only just because people in Salem like it, are happy for it, and all the other towns are trying to chase it away. So, you know, but I don't think cultivation is going to be a really big use going forward in this city. I mean, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but.
Councilor Repplin.
What I'm envisioning is someone who wants to basically be the holistic person, from growing to manufacturing to selling. It's literally, like, again, sorry to use the agriculture, but farm to table. That's essentially what this, that's essentially what this could essentially be. If you have a small cultivation operation, you could go along the line, and if it's properly zoned that way, that's what this would allow for. I don't know if that economic model, if that works, and I'm not investing in it. And for the record, I have never smoked marijuana in my life. But I do see that it's important for us to do this right and to not price someone out.
Any other councilors? Planning board members? Yes, sir.
Back on the topic of playgrounds, it would be helpful if the planning department could provide the definitive classification of what's included, whether it's a playground or a park, and whether the park includes the green areas on the zoning map, which include residential conservation, as well as conservation overlay districts, because there are a whole slew of things that are not playgrounds or parks that are green on the map, and it's entirely unclear, and their distribution across the city is all over the place. Just to add a little bit more confusion.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? Okay. Because this is a separate public hearing, we're going to open it up to public comments. And again, I would ask that you you limit your comments to this subject and keep it to, we'll go into 1 minute this time because we're getting deeper and deeper into this. Anybody want to speak? No? Okay. Paula?
I'm a little unclear about the exact language that's included in this part of the public hearing, but I believe Councilor Famico brought up public safety. So just to layer onto that, one of the concerns I had was from an actual applicant in the medical marijuana category who came to our neighborhood association, wanted to open up in the B1 next to me in a property that had no second egress. And despite the fact that the city had told them that that property was eligible and that that space was okay, I would ask the council to think about directing the city departments that would be involved in these approvals, that there are some basic parameters of public safety that I think make common sense, but that were not apparently at the top of the discussion for an applicant in terms of property.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael Latulip, 190 Bridge Street. I want to thank everyone. The discussion has been great. I want to thank Councilor Epley for really pointing out the small business owner and that we really need to look out for them in this case. And I want to point to Colorado, somewhere that we should probably not take as an example for Massachusetts, because often these cultivation facilities are out in rural parts of Colorado in which they're going to have to generate their own electricity because there's no connection or no unit, as opposed to Massachusetts, which is not very rural, and we have the infrastructure to handle these cultivation centers. And today, actually, I actually am on the industry subcommittee of the Cannabis Advisory Board, and one of the recommendations that was passed, I voted on today from the Department of Agriculture, actually lists out tiers of licenses starting at 1,000 feet and below, going from 1,000 to 5,000, 5,000 to 10,000, and then 10,000 plus for the large cultivators. So I think that, to your point, by ensuring that that there's not that limit for those cultivars that are applying that are under 10,000 square feet, these small cooperatives would be great. And I heard a lot of talk about agricultural uses by right, and that's true. There is no longer an agricultural use by right for marijuana, but the city can zone within those agricultural zones if they see fit for something like a small cooperative craft grow of maybe only 1,000 feet, if it were good and all the circumstances played out. So I just wanted to add that in there. Thank you guys. I think this conversation is going great.
Thank you. I'm going to remember that term, craft grow. Any other comments? Councilor Famico.
Just one question on section 6.10.3. And I know this was previously in the definition, or it's in the definitions as well. I think it's a question for the assistant solicitor or from the planning department. Would a marijuana manufacturing facility, would a bakery fall under that? Because this talks about manufacture, process, and package or products.
Yes.
So that would, so like a mom and pop bakery that wanted to make something that's, okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
To piggyback on that, would that also apply to a mom and pop candy store that manufactures candy? Sorry.
Yes.
Any manufacturing?
Any other questions? Seeing none, do I have a motion on the floor? Councilor Terrio?
Thank you, Madam President. I move the public hearing be closed.
Second.
Discussion? Councilor Terrio's motion that we close the public hearing. All those in favor? All those opposed? That matter carries. Councilor Terrio?
Thank you, Madam President. I move the matter be referred to the planning board for their recommendation.
Second.
Any discussion? No? Okay. All those in favor? All those opposed? Matter carries. We have one.
Public hearing number 3. We have the third
Number
one now.
3, correct. Yes, I was just about to say that. Okay, the third and final, section 10.0, definitions relative to marijuana. Any comments, questions? None. Okay. Councilor Terrio.
Thank you, Madam President. I would just say this one is fairly straightforward, and it has the, just to note for us, we have the section that was changed here, defining testing facility. Kind of for the record to note that.
Yeah. Anyone else? No. No.
Is there any reason why in this section we cannot specifically define what parks and open space and all of these things that we're specifically referring to in the other section? Is there any reason why those can't be legally defined in this section so there's not confusion about them?
I'd have to go back
Good point.
and look at the rest of the zoning ordinance to make sure they weren't conflicting with any other use of those terms in any other section, so I'd be reluctant to do that. I mean, we can talk about that as the process goes forward at the planning board, but we definitely need to take a look at that and see whether we could or could not do that in the overall ordinance.
I feel like if we can, it would be cleaner. If not, I feel like we need to seems to be significant confusion about what those terms mean and how they're being applied.
One of the things that we could talk about going forward is adding a qualifier, such as we have with the medical marijuana, in parks and playgrounds and/or playgrounds where children congregate, and that might put us in a more defined area that we could all agree on what that meant.
Although I would argue that also could mean anything, right? What does it mean when children congregate there? I mean, I think to Kurt's earlier point too, I think, we obviously want to be sensitive to actual playgrounds and things like that, but if we move too far into just general open space, maybe we can deal with the willows as a separately defined thing without creating a sort of network of open spaces that basically preclude anyone from doing anything anywhere in the city.
I think that's something we can work on ahead of the planning board deliberation and help define that better for you. I'm sure with Amanda and Aaron, we'll work on that, get you some clarity.
Thank you.
Councilor Dibble.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. There exists a list of parks and playgrounds in a recreational manual that we have. It already exists. We can simply add the listing of the parks to this document. Then we have total clarity on it.
Because,
Councilor Sargent.
Are you all set, Councilor?
Yes.
Yeah, just because the state, our parks have to be accepted by the state. We can't sell a piece of parkland without state approval. So that if we go along that route, it should make it pretty clear what a park is, because if it's a green space that isn't accepted by the state as a park, then we can't call it a park at this time. Or we have to apply to the state to call that piece of land a park. And if we add to the end of it, will children congregate, then somebody could argue, well, yes, that's a park, but I haven't seen children congregate in that part of the park for 5 years, so it doesn't fit. We can put it right across the street from there. So I agree with Noah. It should be as clear as we can make it. Thank you.
Since this is such a fun topic, my motivation for trying to bring clarity to it is I'm unclear if the conservation zone immediately adjacent to the dormitories in Ward 7 or Salem Woods, or where, how, what defines congregating, all that. It's all very unclear to me, and I think it's going to be very difficult to encapsulate in just a couple sentences and a definitions.
Right.
And I yield to you, obviously, in terms of, is it better to have the definition in a single place and go to reference that as opposed to try to duplicate or expand it?
And one of the things to keep in mind too,
Can you go up here so that they'll hear you? Thank you.
get the slack here at the end.
Sorry.
One of the things to keep in mind about the whole park and parkland piece is that the state law tells us that it can only, we can only restrict, they will only not grant a license to something that's 500 feet or less from a K through 12 public school. So our expansion of that in this proposed ordinance is for a notice requirement. Okay? So it's less integral to, obviously, I think it will come into play in terms of Board of Appeals special permit grant. It'll come into play with respect to the letter of non-opposition that the council and the mayor will have to both agree on going forward. So I think, I think it's a guideline. It's more like a guideline for these establishments, more so than a strict "you must not" type of requirement.
Councilor Terrio, Councilor Repley.
Thank you, Madam President. Yeah, I think having some more clarity to what is a park is going to be helpful, even in terms of what triggers the notification process. So we know that this is a piece of recreational land, and if we have, as the Ward 7 councilor pointed out, if we have within our from Parks and Rec, or however we have it registered, if we have a registered list, if we can insert some text in here in this process that refers to that list, that'll give us clarity as to, okay, look this up. Does this fall within the requirements? Okay, we got to send out notices, because that's where, it might not be allowed, or it might be within in an area that would otherwise be allowed, but still, if it's a place that's going to generate significant opposition, then there's a good chance that that will not happen, so.
Councilor Ripley.
Just as an offer of potential definition, is a playground, a ball field, or a skate park. Those are reasonable places that you can imagine children would congregate, rather than an open space, an open field. Anything and everything can happen there, you know. But I'm just thinking of, like, you know, a baseball field, you know, McGrath soccer field, the skate park in Ward 4, you know, and then playgrounds. I think that touches most of the intended definition, but I could be wrong.
And the Willows.
And the Willows.
Which has a playground fairly close to it, so, one by your house.
Councilor Dibble.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. I think if we start talking about where children congregate and start identifying the playground, the ball field, the basketball court, the soccer field, on and on, I think it's the wrong approach, because we have pickleball courts and other new things that are going to be built in the future. They're talking about bocce courts, and we could list all of these recreational facilities, and we'd still miss some more that we forgot about or that aren't built yet in Salem. So I like the idea. Let's take a look at the existing list that we have for our parks in Salem, and list that. And to get to Kurt's point about the wooded area,
Yes.
if we just simply add the lands that are owned by the Salem Conservation Commission, that addresses Kurt's comments about the wooded area immediately touching the South Campus dorms. There's 37 properties, Kurt, and they're owned by the Salem Conservation Commission. It would just cover that base. It's not open space owned by the City of Salem, it's Conservation Commission land.
Councilor Famico.
Yes, Madam President. However, if you do that, if you think of the 500-foot buffer or even buffers to other places, I think once again you start limiting any place you can go. If you think of some of the borders of those properties and where the whole perimeter is, if you were to look at 500 feet out, you could all of a sudden limit even more for that. I think that in general, I mean, we're going back and forth on what to add and what not. It would just be helpful for all of us to have that list of the parks and playgrounds and what we're actually talking about for that.
Can I clarify one thing, Madam President? So I think we're getting a little confused here around our parks and playgrounds scenario. Again, number 5 here on page 5, what we're proposing is that a marijuana establishment shall not be located within 500 feet of a pre-existing public or private school providing education in kindergarten or any grades 1 through 12. That's the only restriction, is this 500-foot bubble around education, kindergarten through first through 12. Then we also say the marijuana establishment which is proposing a location within 500 feet of any church, library, institution of higher education, licensed daycare center, nursery, school, playground, or park, as suggested, must provide written notice of its intention to these entities prior to or in conjunction with any request for a letter of support or non-opposition. Again, we're not being restrictive in not allowing these uses within 500 feet of churches, libraries, higher institutions, licensed daycare centers, nursery schools, playgrounds. We're simply notifying abutters within 500 feet, and the limit of not allowing these uses is simply only around private schools or public schools, grades 1 through 12. And on the
Because that comes from the law itself.
that is the law. That is the state law. And the piece about notification of parks or playgrounds, the city owns a lot of parks and playgrounds. We will know that this is coming before us. So to notify the city or really dive into which parks are we notifying seems a little silly in some ways, in my opinion. But then again, we will be notifying all the abutters, or at least we've outlined that we'll be notifying abutters, and the city will be an abutter in many instances around parks and playgrounds.
You have the floor.
Thank you. And then with that, with the parks and playgrounds, actually with the city, it's overseen by our Parks and Rec Commission, so they would get the notification, but I'd like to see this firmed up, the notification, the written notice that it goes into both the property owner and, I don't know what the legal term is, but whoever the renter is, the leasee, whatever it is, to make sure the actual person within there.
The user. The person who's engaged in the use that we're trying to
But
prove.
to later on,
Point taken.
go into that. And I guess to go into the definitions in general, and I know I asked earlier if we would consider bakers, I hope that is something that's considered, that all of a sudden by the current uses of where things go, you can't have a bakery in a downtown, I don't believe. But just consider that.
Councilor Dibble, Councilor McCarthy.
Thank you, Madam President. I think Planning Board member Dale Yale might remember when 31 years ago I was asked by the Chief of Police, Chief St. Pierre back then, to create a map of illegally sold drugs in Salem and what a 1,000-foot border would look like around all the public elementary schools in Salem. And I created that map in about 2 hours by hand with an offset. And that map, I think, was used by a couple of decades. It might still be used by the police department. I think it'd be very easy to, in today's GIS and computer age, when we didn't have computers back then to this degree, that it would be very easy to create such a map to show what areas would be in a 500-foot area or preferably a 1,000-foot setback from these sites we're talking about. I agree with our planner that when she says that this is what it says, but that's what it says here on this piece of paper. It doesn't mean that we can't change this. So where she says it only speaks to public and private K through 12 schools, there's no reason why we can't add universities and colleges to that list. There's no reason why we can't add parks and playgrounds to that list. It doesn't have to come in the notification section. So at our last meeting, and this is for the planning board for your consideration, at our last meeting and then early again tonight, I asked that within the first section of that, the 500-foot non-allowed use, that it changed to 1,000 feet, and that in addition to private and public elementary schools through K to 12, that we add colleges and universities, but we also add parks and playgrounds to that first section, not to the letter section, the second half. Let's do this and do it right. Put the restriction as requested, 1,000 feet for all schools, K through bachelor degree, if you would, colleges and universities, parks and playgrounds, and make it 1,000 feet. Thank you.
Madam President,
Yes, ma'am.
we are currently reviewing the definition, section 10, is that correct?
Can I allow Councilor McCarthy to speak? He's had his hand up for a
I
little bit.
couldn't agree more. We closed the public hearing with regards to whichever this one is. We're on section 10.0, specifically definitions with regards to marijuana. It was suggested earlier by some of the planning board that to simplify things, we add the definition of playground, if it could be added to this section, because this is amending definitions. But with regards to the public hearing, we closed the public hearing on the whole discussion about what we've been talking about for the last 10 minutes. We need to get back to, as was just pointed out, we need to get back to the definitions of section 10. And as was noted by someone on the planning board, if we could specifically define playgrounds in this section, so to help, we will. But for right now, we're talking about 10.0.
Erin, did you want to?
I think the resolution here is pretty simple. If the planning board would certainly entertain some suggestions and would ask the planning board staff and the city solicitor to provide us some suggestions on how we might address this issue of defining playgrounds and parks. We can consider that when we meet as a board.
Thank you. Anyone else? No. Okay. And we'll open it up to the public, but I think the public is pretty well gone. Anyone want to speak? No. Okay. Counselor Terrell.
Thank you, Madam President. I move the public hearing be closed.
Second.
Counselor Terrell moves the public hearing be closed. All those in favor? All those opposed? That matter carries. Counselor Terrell.
Thank you, Madam President. I further move that the matter be referred to the planning board for their recommendation.
Second.
Counselor Terrell moves that this be referred to the planning board for their recommendation. All those in favor? All those opposed? That matter carries. Counselor Fury.
Motion to adjourn, Madam President.
Okay, motion to adjourn. Yeah.
Thank you.